I'm Gabriela. Welcome to the DANSOX Summer School 2020. This is lecture number 6, and my talk is titled Verse Play or Spoken Ballet, Rupert Dune, Diaghilev's Ballets Russes, and a New Poetic Drama. On the 1st of October 1935, W.H. Auden's The Dance of Death saw its public premiere at London's Westminster Theatre. This production was part of the group theatre's first public season, and it captured the attention of the critical realm. Theatre critic Harold Hobson declared The Dance of Death Mr. Auden's brilliant attempt to work out for the theatre a new significant art form, which, he predicted, may prove epoch-making. Although Hobson was unenthused by what he called the Marxist content of The Dance of Death, he lauded the way in which the production created dramatic effect by employing all the instruments of theatrical expression: song and dance, speech and action, mime and decoration, and grouping. For theatre manager Ashley Dukes, this formal innovation seemed strikingly balletic, and he couldn't quite decide whether to call it a verse play or a spoken ballet. The Dance of Death constituted a new development in poetic drama, one that embodied Edward Gordon Craig's ideal of total theatre, whilst privileging corporeal expression in such a way as to reveal the balletic underpinning of its dramaturgy. This innovation in form recalled the ballet-oriented Gesamtkunstwerk pioneered by Serge Diaghilev's Ballets Russes, and it originated not with Auden, but rather with Rupert Dune, founder of the group theatre and former dancer with Diaghilev's company. When Diaghilev died and the Ballets Russes disbanded, Dune helped ensure Diaghilev's theatrical legacy by forming a philosophy of poetic drama that aspired to the marriage of the arts offered by the Russian ballet. Dune invited Auden to provide the poetic dramatic text of The Dance of Death as an initial vehicle for his theories, and together they inaugurated what Dukes would later call the English theatre's new dramatic poetry. Dune is often considered a marginal figure in narratives of modernist poetic drama. It's partially due to the paucity of information on his life, career, and dramaturgical ideals. What I want to look at today is some archival material concerning Dune and The Dance of Death that attests to the profoundly influential role that Dune played in shaping what came to be hailed as a crucial development in poetic dramatic form. This material also reveals the nuanced relationship between Diaghilev's company and The Dance of Death, as this work finds its genesis in Dune's quest to integrate a poetic dramatic text into the Ballets Russes' particular confluence of dance, music, and the visual arts. It is important to note that The Dance of Death was part of a greater theatrical zeitgeist that saw T.S. Eliot, W.B. Yeats, and Gordon Bottomley all experimenting with new kinds of dance-centered verse drama. At the same time, there was the specifically expressionist aesthetic of German Tanztheater, introduced to London in 1933 through Kurt Jooss's award-winning work, The Green Table. The Dance of Death was shaped by these contexts, and particularly by Jooss, in whose work Dune found a compelling new mode of stage expression. But I want to focus on uncovering what has proven to be a particularly elusive strand of influence to demonstrate that Dune would not have possessed the skills to envision such a production without first having had the experience of Diaghilev's company. Rupert Dune's Ballets Russes career lasted only 1 month. It began in July 1929 and was interrupted in August 1929, when Diaghilev died unexpectedly and the Ballets Russes disbanded. The brevity of Dune's involvement with Diaghilev's company suggests that we must take a cautious approach to discussions of influence. By the time Dune founded the group theatre in 1932, he had spent over a decade working with a vast array of the period's theatre and dance practitioners, from Rolf de Marais to Max Reinhardt. Yet the painter Robert Medley, Dune's partner and the group theatre's co-founder, indicates the significance of Diaghilev's company, recalling that the dissolution of the Ballets Russes marked a turning point in Dune's career. Medley recalls that when Diaghilev died and the pillar that had sustained Dune's ambition had fallen, Dune quickly came to the idea that no other company of comparable artistic and creative standards existed. But there were lessons to be learned from Diaghilev's vision, a theatre of all the arts, that were generally applicable. Why not open up the field in the straight theatre and make other opportunities for himself? It was with this idea of total theatre in mind that Dune chose the name group theatre, which stemmed from his conception of a creative theatre in which collaboration would lead to a new sort of expression unknown in the English theatre at that time. Dune's letters reveal that while Medley is right to emphasize the role that the dissolution of the Ballets Russes played in Dune's turn to the straight theatre, Dune's path was a bit more serpentine than Medley lets on. In the early months of 1930, Dune was living in Monte Carlo, trying to figure out what to do in a world without Diaghilev, and trying his hand at writing short stories. Much of Dune's writing from this time is remarkable in its own right, but in the context of the group theatre, Dune's writing is most illuminating when it addresses Diaghilev's company, as it then begins to expose what Dune found most compelling about the Ballets Russes. An unfinished story that Dune began probably in the early 1930s, entitled How I Became a Russian Ballet Dancer, reveals that Dune's early fascination with Diaghilev's company had much to do with corporeal expressivity. Dune opens this story with an anecdote about the first time he saw Anna Pavlova perform and came to understand her capacity to express physically the magical fire that lies in man. He describes his desire to obtain this same power as unabashedly Faustian, and we begin to see that Dune was less concerned with providing the audience with a visual spectacle than he was with manipulating the audience's emotions in the name of creating art. Dune uses stealing as an analogy to dancing, yearning in performance to cheat and burgle the emotions of the watcher. Yet a dancer who wishes only to steal from the audience, Dune argues, betrays his art. For Dune, the superlative example of how one might transform thievery into art lay in Václav Nijinsky's performances in Afternoon of a Faun and The Spirit of a Rose. He who makes the rape of a scarf or the spirit of a rose a true thrill, he wrote, is one who makes art. Although Dune abandons his story after detailing the early years of his career, he leaves us with the remarkable vestiges of a story about his evolution into a Diaghilev dancer, one that begins with the disclosure of his desire for an almost superhuman corporeal expressivity that offers the power to change even the most unsavory subject matter into art. Dune's dramaturgical ideals for the group theatre were profoundly shaped by his veneration of the corporeal expressivity of Ballets Russes dancers and by his faith in this expressivity's power to facilitate artistic creation. In a manifesto outlining what we hope for in the group theatre, Dune states his intention of restoring the actor to a central position in the theatre and proposes using Diaghilev's company as a model. The first step that Dune proposes is training the actors to dance. And what we have here is the group theatre in training. Dune found training actors in movement methods integral to the performance of poetic drama in particular, because ideally, actors do not simply perform a poetic dramatic text, they somehow transform it and create it anew. Dune believed that there is no such thing as an interpretive art. The actor does not interpret the poet's words, he recreates them. Proposing a creative intelligence that takes hold in the body, Dune privileges the ephemerality but also the tangibility of the actor's craft. Because the body can never be abstracted like the other arts, Dune argues, it offers a poignancy and directness that suggests the theatre must be used for the actor's medium. Although Dune advocates a theatre in which the moving body of the actor dominates, he does not condone any sort of performer autocracy. Diaghilev's prioritization of the artwork as a whole resonated with Dune, and at the group theatre, neither actor nor poetic text governed Dune's theatrical model. He endorsed a wholly collaborative atmosphere and elevated the actor to an integral but single author of the artistic creation. The most important element in the theatre, Dune contended, is not the actor, the producer, the painter, or the poet. It is the dramatic content, that invisible fluid that moves the audience, a chemical compound of the ideas of all who have given their ideas to the production. John Piper, a group theatre stenographer, believed that this ideal of theatrical unity as a product of collaboration was modeled on the Ballets Russes. Dunne's manifesto attests to Piper's conviction. After raising the Ballets Russes as an example for the group theatre, Dunne explains, "Why I stress this point is that one may attempt a successful marriage of the arts in the group theatre." The Ballets Russes was by no means the sole influence acting upon Dunne. Whilst separating intertwined strands of influence helps us to see that Dunne's basis for the Gesamtkunstwerk was in the Ballets Russes, it is important to acknowledge that in the group theatre's formative years, Dunne's dramaturgy shifted to accommodate new modern expression, and predominantly that which he found in the work of Kurt Jooss. Jooss was a German dancer and choreographer who had begun his career in the 1920s, studying with pioneer of the expressionist dance movement, Rudolf Laban. Jooss further developed the work of Laban, fusing expressionist dance with music and dramatic form to create Tanztheater, a type of movement-based theatre that tended to address themes dealing with fear or human conflict. Throughout his career, Jooss established several important companies and schools, notably the Folkwang-Schule in Essen, which would go on to produce the famous choreographer Pina Bausch. And in 1932, he distinguished himself as a choreographer, when the Green Table won first prize at a competition for new choreography held in Paris. Having met Laban in the late 1920s, Dunne was enthusiastic about the theatrical possibilities emerging from within the expressionist dance movement. In the early 1930s, Dunne received a letter from Laban and Jooss that presented the possibility of increasing his involvement in the development of Tanztheater. Laban and Jooss wanted Dunne to come to the newly established Ballets Russes to train their modern dancers in classical ballet. Dunne's acceptance was conditional on the promise that he would be allowed to choreograph new works for Jooss's company, and the deal predictably fell apart. Medley recalls that there were no hard feelings on either side, and when Jooss's The Green Table came to London later in 1933, Dunne and Jooss met as friends. In viewing this work, Dunne, Medley recalls, recognized immediately that Kurt had already succeeded in doing the new kind of work that he envisaged for the group theatre. This statement is remarkable considering the correspondences between The Green Table and Auden's The Dance of Death, which premiered in London the following year. The Green Table, subtitled A Dance of Death in 8 Scenes, featured mortality personified in the figure of Death, a dancer, and offered commentary on the brutality and futility of war. As in the group theatre's production of Auden's play, masks were used to exaggerate facial features, and pistol shots were used for moments of emphasis. Both The Dance of Death and The Green Table were politically charged danse macabres, and Suzanne Walter's observation that in The Green Table, the choreography of the ballet is inseparable from its message resonates with the group theatre's aims. Auden's The Dance of Death was published in 1933, so the very premise, which is itself, of course, a prominent late medieval allegory, was probably not derived from Jooss, but the staging similarities lend significance to Dunne's admiration of Jooss's work. So Auden's The Dance of Death was the group theatre's first commissioned work and Dunne's first opportunity to fashion his collaborative poets' theatre, modeled on the Ballets Russes and further honed by his exposure to the work of Jooss and, of course, more. Despite Dunne's ideals, there was no egalitarian cooperation between choreographer, designer, composer, and poet, but between Auden and Dunne, the collaborative process was reasonably hierarchical. Although Auden provided the textual framework that guided the production, the play had been commissioned by Dunne to suit the group theatre's dramaturgical needs. When The Dance of Death was published in 1933, so this was prior to its performance, it garnered mixed reviews. The text was provocative doggerel that on reading made little sense, and the political message was frustratingly imprecise. In the announcer's words, the announcer was a sort of narrator who takes the role of fate. This one-act play was simply a picture of the decline of a class. This moribund middle class is dreaming of a new life, but, the announcer tells us, they secretly desire the old, for there is death inside them. We show you that death as a dancer. This dancer, capitalism incarnate, leads the middle class on a Dantean journey from escapism at a Riviera hotel to nationalistic zeal, from an idealistic attempt to reach the heart of reality to a New Year's party at a nightclub. Karl Marx then takes a bit part, arriving to Mendelssohn's Wedding March, only to watch the dancer expire and to pronounce, in the closing lines of the play, "The instruments of production have been too much for him. He is liquidated." This ending made it difficult even for leftist critics to extract a clear message from the palpable Marxist inclination of the text. Terence Greenidge of the Socialist Review thought that, although it is good that Auden should be on our side, the denouement is too abrupt, and the leading up to it is very obscure. In short, the Marxism seemed to me to misfire. As the frankly bizarre nature of Auden's text suggests, The Dance of Death is more libretto than script, and meaning begins to crystallize when the text is staged. So The Dance of Death was produced by the Group Theatre in 1934 for a private performance, and then in 1935 for its public premiere. For these productions, Dune choreographed the main role of Death, which he danced himself, as well as the chorus. Herbert Murrell wrote, directed, and played the music, and Medley made the costumes and props. The Group Theatre's heavily annotated prompt book bears witness to the extent to which dance and movement both subverted and supported textual meaning in performance. This prompt book offers elaboration on Dune's dances, and the movements of the chorus are carefully notated throughout. These notations reveal the extent to which Dune suggests, through his choreography, that the political ideology standing at the center of the production may be most effectively spread through a message that manifests itself not only in the poetic dramatic text, but also in the dance. The inextricability of dance and political ideology is most evident in a transition from communism to fascism that happens early in the play. As the audience, actors spread throughout the theater, sing about the Red Front and encourage the chorus to rise and make a workers' state, the German theater manager implores the dancer to prevent such behavior and be our savior. Dune begins to dance as a demagogue, and the chorus loses their menacing attitudes and becomes fascinated. As Dune dances, the crowd follows his movements with their arms held loosely in the air, swaying forwards and backwards to the dancer's movements as though hypnotized. The announcer reinforces Dune's dances with his chants of English justice, English morals, England for the English, narrating the dancer's corporeal attempts to stir up an English revolution with his own xenophobic tirade, whilst keeping his eyes shut tight as though to prevent himself from being drawn into this mesmeric dance. This dance ends abruptly when the chorus moves their arms upwards in fascist salutes that echo the sentiment of the stage decorations. As we can see, this photograph of the scene shows the chorus grouped together and saluting Dune, who is surrounded by flags bearing large N's that suggest the word Nazi, along with a German military emblem, the Iron Cross. The chorus then turns to beat up the stage manager, who has been singled out as a, quote, dirty Jew. The transition to fascism is complete, and the chorus form a corporeal ship of England to cross the ocean and save the Anglo-Saxon race, hoisting Dune up onto their shoulders to lead the way. In this ship, the chorus begins singing of racial purity, evoking the Nuremberg laws that had been enacted in Germany just 2 weeks before the Dance of Death's 1935 public premiere. The ship then hits a storm, and the chorus's formation becomes increasingly disintegrated as Dune whirls around the stage before collapsing in an epileptic fit. A doctor is called in from the audience, and the chorus breaks up all over the stage while whispering SE diseases with concerned glances at dancer. S seems to code syphilis. Disease and fascist ideology prove to be of the same communicable nature, spreading through the figure of the dancer. Death, however, will not hit yet. The dancer is given an injection and a warning to stay away from politics, and the scene moves on ultimately to a dance that culminates in the dancer's paralysis. The chorus then retires to a nightclub, as do members of the audience, who climb up onto the stage and begin to speak in an English approximation of the German language. The dancer is wheeled in to write his will, in which he offers repentance. He has decided to leave his worldly possessions to the working class. He buys a round of drinks for the chorus for a New Year's toast, and as the clock strikes 12, the chorus adopts the Germanic manner of speaking. In the context of their earlier embrace of fascist ideology, the middle class's linguistic switch gains a sinister trace. Yet for this, the Dance of Death has a new solution. Whereas in Auden's published text, Karl Marx enters as Mendelssohn's Wedding March plays, in performance the march is cut, the marriage between Marx and the middle class is withdrawn, and Marx and two young communists enter the stage not after the dancer has passed away from vigorous dancing, but rather after 2 revolver shots are heard off stage and before 3 more revolver shots occur on stage. Ivor Brown's review suggests that it was not only the dancer who dies here. Brown writes that in Auden's piece, the futile middle-class people at one period put on black shirts and maul a Jew. Disgusting. Agreed. Then the noble red shirts come along and liquidate the middle class. I gathered that a little mass murder was supposed to be a happy ending. Marx eliminates the middle class, causing the final lines of the play, Marx's "the instruments of production have been too much for him, he is liquidated," to become heavily ironic. Yet there is a patriotism to this act. It is followed by the corpse of the dancer being wrapped in the Union Jack and carried off stage. Chopin's Funeral March replaces Mendelssohn's Wedding March, and as the play closes, in A.V. Cookman's words, the stage was left to Mr. Karl Marx, who, with a hopeful air, waved the red flag over the smoke of his escort's revolvers. Upon seeing The Dance of Death in 1935, Ashley Dukes wrote that if this is an example of spoken ballet, then in expressiveness it stands far above the silent form employed by Jos, or for that matter, Massin. It is possible that the palpable balletic nature of The Dance of Death stemmed partially from the very presence of Dune. The Dance of Death is a highly meta-theatrical work, and the program highlighted Dune's career as a ballet russe dancer. Yet the balletic underpinning of Dune's dramaturgy, in conjunction with the choreography evidenced by the prompt book, suggests that we should read these reviews as an acknowledgement of the significance of movement and dance and corporeal rhetoric to the understanding of the very content of The Dance of Death. Dune replaced what might have been illustrative props or sets with corporeal architecture. His choreography aided in the expression of Auden's text. And in Dune's chorus, the individuality of the dancers is subsumed into a fascist group identity in a sort of Nietzschean frenzy so powerful that the announcer has to keep his eyes closed to avoid being drawn in. The meta-theatricality of the work suggests that the audience, too, might do better to avert their gazes to avoid the power of this political draw. In 1948, Ashley Dukes would reflect on the origins of the English theatre's new dramatic poetry and contend that while many suppose that the Mercury Theatre's 1935 production of T.S. Eliot's Murder in the Cathedral marked the beginning of this new poetic drama, it can in fact be traced to around 1930 with the establishment of Rupert Dune's group theatre. The Dance of Death marked the emergence of this new poetic drama, contesting the hierarchy of a theatre in which the poetic dramatic text reigned, whilst exploring the political potential of a message created by the interaction of poetic dramatic text, visual metaphor, and corporeal rhetoric. Hobson, the critic with whom I began this talk, had anticipated that the formal innovation of The Dance of Death would render it epoch-making, appreciating it less for its intrinsic merits than for what it indicated for the future of verse drama. Although Hobson joined a host of further critics in tracing the innovation of this new significant art form directly to Auden, this new form was conceived of and brought into existence by Dune, a dancer who recognized in the Ballets Russes a connection between corporeal creative intelligence and theatrical unity, and considered what possibilities might be generated in introducing a poetic dramatic text. If you have any questions, please send them to development.office@sthildas.ox.ac.uk. And in the subject line, please put DANSOX in uppercase. And then we will send you a link to the webinar discussion where you can discuss this and the other lectures. Thank you.